Hello, and thanks for joining our demonstration of managing accounts and contacts. Today, we'll spend some time talking about core demographic coding considerations for accounts and contacts. We'll also talk a bit about best practices for solicitor assignments, and finally, we'll talk about options for customizing your page layout. I'd like to start by talking about core demographic coding for your accounts and contacts. Now, you have many options when it comes to coding these records. It's important to consider carefully because fields are often on different objects, and this can affect your reporting. Often, it's easier to report on these codes when they remain on the same object. The fields I'd like to focus on today are primary classification and type. We'll start by talking about primary classification. Primary classification is a field that's on the household contact record by default. It's meant to code people, or rather show how people are involved with your organization. It is a field that looks up to a custom object, so it does take up storage space in your system. For some organizations, that's not an issue, but it is something to think about before implementing this field. As I mentioned, this is a field that's used to code people. So we're presented with a question. What should we do if we want to use primary classification to code organization records? Well, the option available to us is to add this field to the page layout of our organization donor proxy contact record. As a refresher, the organization donor proxy contact record is a system-generated org contact record that's created when a new organization account is added to your system. The purpose of the organization donor proxy record is to be assigned the role of donor for all donations made by the organization. It's best practices to avoid editing or manipulating your organization donor proxy record. So we try not to use the option of adding primary classification to the organization donor proxy record. An alternative is to use the type field, which I'd like to go into some detail about now. The type field is on the organization account record by default. It's a code that's meant to show organizations, or what types of organizations you have in your system. This is a Salesforce standard field, and the data type is a pick list. You can customize this pick list with values that meet the needs of your organization. Also, this field doesn't affect your storage space. As I mentioned, it's a field that's meant to code organizations. So again, we're presented with a question. What should we do if we want to use type field on the records of individuals? Well, we can add this field type to the household account page layout. You can also add some values to the pick list available for individual records. This is an option that we typically recommend. One of the reasons we like using type for both organizations and individual records is because although it's just on the account object, you're often able to pull this field into reports on donations and contacts. By using this field, you'll be able to report on giving by record type for organizations and households together within the same report without having to edit your organization's donor proxy contact record. What I'd like to do now is go into an instance of Luminate CRM and show you some examples of where these codes are on records. We'll start by taking a look at primary classification. We'll go into Clark Kent's contact record. If we look on the right side of the contact detail section of our page layout, we see that Clark Kent has been assigned the primary classification of individual. As I mentioned, we would have to add this field to the organization donor proxy contact record page layout in order to make it available for organization records. For demonstration, I've added this to the Goodman Foundation. We're in the Goodman Foundation organization donor proxy record, and you can see here that we've added primary classification to the page layout and assigned a value of foundation. As I mentioned, we prefer to use the field type on account record. If we go into the Goodman Foundation's account record, we see that the type field is selected with a value of foundation for this account. We've also added this field to the page layout for our household account. In the Clark Kent household record, we see that the field type has been added to the page layout, and a value of individual has been assigned to Clark Kent. Now, you don't necessarily have to choose between primary classification and account type. You could actually use both. One of the things that we like to do is use type for our broad level coding. You can then use primary classification to perhaps further define the individuals in your system. As I mentioned, by using the field type on household and organization accounts, you'll be able to report on record type for both organizations and individuals all together within the same report. Next, I'd like to talk a little bit about best practices for solicitor assignments. As a refresher, what I'm referring to would be a major gift officer assigned to prospective major donors in your system. There are a couple of different ways to approach tracking these assignments, and the two I'll focus on are relationships and record ownership. First, let's look at relationships. Relationships are a custom object in Luminate CRM that is used to document a relationship between two contacts or a contact and an organization. Relationships are great for tracking solicitor assignments, and one of the reasons is that they can be customized in many ways. For example, you can customize your relationship types to add values specific to your organization. Examples for solicitor assignments would include solicitor and solicitee relationship codes. However, if needed, you can go a little bit more detailed. Examples would include board solicitor, lead staff solicitor, secondary solicitor, and so on. Another great thing about relationships is that you can track additional details. For example, you're able to track start and end dates for all of your relationships, as well as notes about the relationship itself. Another great thing is that there really isn't a limit to the number of relationships you have. So if you're an organization that assigns multiple solicitors to one prospect, you're able to track all of those assignments simply by using relationships. Do keep in mind, though, that there are some limitations to reporting on relationships. You can store a lot of great details in relationships. However, often you can only pull this information out of the system by using a relationship report. It's really not available in many of the standard reports in the system. And usually users resort to creating a custom report type. I'd also like to talk a little bit about record ownership. Record ownership comes from standard Salesforce functionality. It's essentially the person who owns the record. The system also allows you to build security around the record owner. The record owner defaults to the person who created the record, but this isn't necessarily set in stone. You can easily change to a different owner and send an email notification of that change. By using record ownership, you can quickly and easily filter reports to show only contacts or accounts or any other record that you own. This would be a great way for solicitors to quickly and easily build a list of their prospects. Keep in mind, however, you would have to set all of your solicitors up as users in the system in order to assign them as owners of records. Also, keep in mind that you can only have one owner per record. So if you're an organization that does assign multiple solicitors to one prospect, it's possible that record ownership isn't necessarily going to work for you. Let's go into an instance of Luminate CRM and take a look at examples of relationships and record ownership. I'm going to go back into Clark Kent's contact record, and first we'll take a look at his relationships. We can see here that Bruce Wayne is assigned to Clark Kent as a solicitor. By clicking once on the relationship name, I can view some details of the relationship, including the relationship codes, solicitor and solicitee. We can also see the start date of the relationship, as well as some notes about the relationship itself. We can easily edit the relationship by clicking the Edit Relationship button. As you can see, we've also added an additional solicitor relationship for Clark Kent. Oliver Queen is also assigned as a solicitor. Here we also see the start date and notes about the relationship. If we scroll to the top of the record and look at our contact details section, we can see that the contact owner for this record is the user Midwest BPCG. That's my username, and I own this record. I'd like to go ahead and show you a report that I built filtered to show only my contacts. If I click on the report Midwest VP-CG Prospect List, the report will run, and as you can see, it's showing only my contacts. These are the contacts on which I'm set up as the record owner. I've included in this report basic name information, as well as a couple of prospect research fields such as inclination and capacity, and some giving summaries. As you can see, this report would be rather useful for a solicitor looking to quickly pull a list of their prospects from the system. Because report filtering is so easy when using record owner, we do like using it for solicitor assignments in particular. What we recommend is using record owner in addition to relationships, which will allow you for tracking more details about the assignment itself. By using both relationships and record owners, you're able to get the best of both, report filtering and detail tracking. Finally, I'd like to talk a little bit about page layouts. Page layouts control the layout and organization of the buttons, fields, and related lists of records in your system. They also control field visibility, whether or not a field is read-only, and whether or not a field is required. Page layouts are associated with record types. For example, the household contact record will have a different page layout than an organization contact record. They're also associated with profiles. For example, an operations user might see a different page layout for a record than a major gift officer would see. Let's go back into Luminate CRM and take a look at some examples of useful page layouts. I'm going to go to My Name and Setup. Then I'll select to Customize, Contacts, and finally, I'll select Page Layout. You see here that we have a list of all of the different page layouts that have been set up in our system. If I click on the button Page Layout Assignment, we can see here all of the different profiles and all of the different record types that are associated with the page layouts we've created in our system. For example, the marketing user sees the major gift officer page layout on the household contact record. What I'd like to do is take a quick look at the standard user page layout. I'm going to click Edit. And as you can see here, we're able to drag and drop fields and move them to customize our page layout. You can do the same with entire sections of data. For the standard user page layout, we have contact detail at the top of our screen, followed immediately by address information and phone information. We then have personal information and employment information, as well as relationships. If we scroll down further on the page, we see that we have prospect intelligence information, and these fields have been set to read only. So a standard user or operations team member would not be able to edit the prospect research field. Now let's take a look at the page layout for the major gift officer. You can see here that we still have our contact detail section at the top of the screen, but now these fields have all been marked as read-only because we don't want our major gift officers to edit these records. Rather than immediately following with address and phone information, we've moved the prospect research section to the top of the list, and these fields are editable for the major gift officer. Immediately thereafter, we have our giving summary, followed by relationships. Much further down on the page, we have address and phone information, which is also set to read only. Again, so the major gift officers cannot edit core pieces of the record. By customizing page layouts to fit with the different roles that users have in your system, it helps contribute to user adoption and, in general, makes the system a little bit more easier for everyone to use. Thank you all for taking the time to watch. If you have any questions, please use the Contact Us link at our website. For additional materials, please visit the resources section of our website.